Higher incomes, better health care, safer neighborhoods. Virtually all of us would like to see those goals achieved, of course. But while we may want the same things, conservatives and libertarians and progressives go about getting there in very, very different ways. The John Locke Foundation's Dr. Roy Cordato has been looking at the unifying themes of progressivism. He joins me now to talk about that. Roy, welcome back to the program.
Glad to be back, Donna.
What is progressivism? I mean, the word itself sounds pretty forward-thinking.
Yeah, well, and in recent years, liberals have been wanting to use the word progressive instead of liberal. And I think that's a great idea because they really do harken back to the progressive movement of the early 20th century. I don't like them using the word liberal because the root of the word liberal is liberty, which I happen to like.
So you would be a classic liberal versus liberal as it's used today.
Right. So I actually prefer to call them what they want to be called, which is progressives, because it recognizes their history, which is in the early 20th century, it was a history of basically using the state to control the economy. It gave us the ideas that ultimately led to Hitler and Mussolini and fascism. So I think it's good for them to use that word. And what I argue in this paper is that the root of what coheres all of that together is the use of coercion and force through the state to achieve goals.
How so?
Well, if you think of modern day progressives, I mean, tends to be the case that they want the things that the rest of us want, right? Better health care, safer streets, and so on and so on. But I think what makes it different is libertarians, conservatives, people like myself, we search for ways to accomplish those goals that are consistent with liberty, that keeps people free and that frees markets, where their unifying theme is they always go for a solution that involves government coercion. No matter what the case is, it's really hard to find an example where they embrace a solution that does not involve government coercion. And when they do, they usually are considered to be going off the reservation, right? To be acting conservative or libertarian in that position. So what I argue in this paper is, and people don't generally recognize it, is the unifying theme of progressivism is not what they want to accomplish. We all want to accomplish good things. And I'm not going to impugn their motives. But it's how we want to accomplish them.
Is it fair to say, Roy, that the unifying theme there is using government to force people or business people or individuals to do things they may not want to do and should have the choice to choose, yes or no?
Yeah, and that's what I mean by coercion. Telling people what to do through with their property and with themselves, and preventing people from pursuing life, liberty, and happiness, right?
That sounds familiar. Let's talk about how this manifests itself in some particular instances of public policy. You write in your paper that minimum wage mandates are a great example of this. Explain that.
Well, look, we all want lower income people to have higher wages, right? Certainly I do. And we don't differ on that goal. Right. So, but when they see a problem like that, they say, well, people should have a living wage. They make these arguments that it's just $7.25, the current minimum wage is just too low for anyone to make it by on. And so their solution is, well, just force employers to pay more. And if you don't, you get heavily fined or go to jail even if you refuse to pay the fines. Where someone like myself, a libertarian economist would say, look, there are ways consistent with freedom to accomplish that same goal, and that is not harmful, because the minimum wage and it prevents people from working. If you're not worth the minimum wage, you don't get employed. So there are ways consistent with voluntarism to get people to earn more money, better education, apprenticeship programs. I mentioned in there, actually, you want somebody to have higher pay, exempt them from Social Security, right? That doesn't affect the market. It allows them to keep more of what they earn. Or
an employer could voluntarily choose to pay whatever hourly wage they wanted to if they felt it was worth it to them.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, the idea is to make that employee worth more, so the employer wants to pay them more, or in fact must pay them more. He never wants to pay them more, but if an employee is worth more, that means he has other options. He can. If an employer isn't paying as much as he's actually worth in the marketplace, he can go out and get a job somewhere else. But someone who is willing to pay. So, look, no employer wants to pay more than he has to for a worker, or for anything else for that matter. But it's marketplace and competition. So what you want to do is make workers more competitive in the marketplace, and you don't do that through force by saying, well, you have to be paid more. Well, it's really you have to be paid more or nothing at all, which is the choice that an employer faces.
Now, you also write that we're seeing the progressive approach in Obamacare.
Sure. Another great example. Look, we want there to be more people insured, right? We want better health care and so on. But when they look at a problem like, well, there's not enough people who are getting health insurance, what's their solution? Well, let's have a law that says that everyone has to get health insurance, and all employers have to provide it. And if you work for yourself, you have to buy it or face stiff fines. That's their solution. It's the coercive solution. Of course, free market economists, health policy analysts on the conservative libertarian side says, yes, we want more people to be insured too. But how can you do that? Well, get rid of regulations that cause health insurance to cost more, get rid of regulations that causes health care, like certificate of need laws, for example, that cause health care to cost more. So you can affect the same solution, which we all want, but through non-coercive means. They always take the coercive route, is the argument I make.
Roy, some would argue that progressivism is growing in popularity in this country. Why?
That's a good question. I think it's because it's easy. I mean, the fact is that state coercion is easy. You don't like something? Well, what's the first thing? There should be a law, right? I mean, this is how we've come to think, which is unfortunate. That if you want something to be different, you just pass a law to force it to be different, and that's a very appealing to people. You have to actually think through free market solutions to understand them.
We've been talking with Dr. Roy Cordato, and we're talking about the piece that he has written, which you can find at carolinajournal.com or johnlocke.org. By the way, johnlocke.org, completely redesigned. If you haven't had a chance to log on, please go and do that. And Roy's piece on coercion and the progressive mindset is right there. Dr. Roy Cordato, thanks so much.
Sure.